Hello and welcome back to another Down the Donut Hole podcast on a Thursday. And that's all I got. I don't know what we're talking about today. This is a surprise subject episode.
Well, yesterday we were talking about solitude, about getting yourself quiet, about connecting with your true self, about making peace with a lot of the stuff that you fret about.
So today we'll be talking about yelling and being noisy.
Well, not really.
Oh,
How
that's
about
good. I don't
today
like that
we
anyway.
talk about shutting out the loud noise and the hustle and bustle of real life? And how about you and I discuss buying a yacht? How do you feel about that? Let's buy a yacht.
I don't know. I think you can sort of buy anything now. Everybody give you credit,
Yeah.
They'll say, oh, it's going to be only 5%. And then a few months later, it's 35%.
That's it. But what I'm thinking about is I want one of those celebrity yachts, those ones that are bigger than a football field, and they have every kind of a thing that you can possibly think about.
So like an aircraft carrier.
Yeah, like an aircraft carrier, but just for us.
No.
I wish you could see his face.
I don't like that much water.
No, but how safe we would feel, how good we would feel.
You're on the ocean, for God's sake.
Yeah, but
not like it's stable or anything.
Yeah, but the celebrities feel very protected there.
And every time the Earth spins around and the moon spins around, it's pulling you this way and that. It's like, no, I don't think so.
So you really never have thought that maybe you would want a yacht?
No, a deserted island maybe, but not.
I don't even want an island.
That floats on the water, no.
Not with sea level rise and all of that. I am reading all the time anymore about this person and that person's yacht, all these celebs and political people. Where the hell do they get the money for that sort of stuff?
Oh, lobbyists, I think.
Yeah, come on. I'm sorry, but that means me and you are financing that to a high degree.
Yeah.
It is a duh. And what about all of the President of the United States accepting a pretty much gilded airplane from a foreign country? There was a time where that would be so suspect. I'm wondering, are they going to rip that plane apart? I mean, rip it apart and make sure that there's no tech in there that could be a breach to national security. And how can we even be sure? I mean, these days, they have all of this.
So was that also the People's plane, or what was it?
No, that's not going to be the People's plane, because that's going to get gifted after his final term, which is this one, if we stick by the rules. That's going to get gifted to the Trump library, but he's still going to have access to it to be able to kind of jet off wherever he wants.
God, how are they going to fit that in the library?
Good point. They better get working on that. Make one of those carports or something for it. That'd be good. I have big problems with all of that. You see increasingly these mega rich people, and they're spending $500 million or more on a yacht. And they're rigging the yacht out with every comfort. But at the end of the day, if things do go to, just disintegrate, if society as we know it goes away and we're dealing with some apocalypse thing, are you going to be able to keep your yacht afloat? This is my question.
Well, that's one thing. If you worry about rising sea levels and all that, I guess it is best to be riding on the sea. So you can go up and down as it does, I guess. But it's not going to be a smooth ride, I don't think.
No, and not only that, but I don't know about you. Maybe it's just our station in life. But anything that requires any sort of technology at one point or another, and usually sooner rather than later, it just quits or it's not working.
Stuff breaks.
You know what? A good example. We had a really nice one of those coffee boilers, a little electric thing that you plug in and it lit up.
Okay, well, we probably could afford that then.
We can afford that. But I mean, we only had that a couple of years and we weren't abusing it or anything. And then all of a sudden, it just quit. Now, if you magnify that thousands of times with all the mechanisms that have to be working right to keep your, $600 million yacht working well, and you're paying 70 people or 60 or 50 people as crew on there, and all of their stuff has to be working right. It just seems like a big headache to me. Doesn't it to you?
Oh, yeah. No doubt about it. But, if you have 70 people, then, you're pretty well insulated from the day-to-day.
Well, no, not really. If you have 70 people for your crew, every single one of those people has a life. Every single one of those people has a personality. And I guarantee not all 70 of those people are going to get along well together or come to work bright and shiny in the morning and be ready to do your bidding without bringing all of their own baggage with them.
Well, you need to have some baggage,
Everybody does. I don't care. Everybody's got their thing.
But they don't have a choice. They're sort of trapped on the boat.
Well, that's it. You got to get yourself kind of sorted out. They should listen to yesterday's podcast because I think we had a lot of good tips about how to get your mind right for whatever you're facing. And I think that that would not be the easiest gig in the world. You could be surrounded by luxury, but that doesn't mean any of it is for you. There's probably
that's exactly
cramped crew quarters somewhere on the deck, and you're supposed to probably make yourself as invisible as possible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's big. We understand that. It's quite big, but still, you're trapped within the confines of that boat.
Yeah. Would you like that?
No, I would not.
Would you like to be trapped within the confines? Let's say that same area on land. Would that make a big difference for you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you compare that to the size of the Earth, for instance, and, if somebody with a lot of money and planes and stuff like that can go wherever they want, but you can't if you're barricaded inside of a yacht or a bunker or something.
Or you're dependent on a crew of that size, everybody doing their job. Now think about it. In a real apocalyptic situation, all of those people probably have loved ones who are not on that boat. And it would be probably in the back of their mind, maybe in the front of their mind, that they would like to spend the last hours, days, weeks with the people that they love and not, fetching drinks or whatever for some celebrity or some mega rich person who long ago lost track of what real humanity is all about and broke that connection voluntarily. So, I don't know. You're putting an awful lot on people, I think. So, and especially currently, a lot of those same celebrities that have these giant yachts and all this, floating opulence, they have demonstrated that they really, really do not care about what happens to the average person. I mean, we've seen that with the Doge cuts. And I know that the MAGA faithful, they're hoping for the best with all of this, and they really did send Donald Trump et al. To the Oval Office to make some serious changes. But I don't think that they really considered that a lot of those changes were going to cut so deeply personally or to people they love and know well and, have been part of their sphere of influence. I think they thought that it was all going to be directed toward the enemies list, which would be Democrats, independents, legal officials who have challenged some of the actions in a judicial way. So all of that. So I don't know. I just think that now it's become clear that there really is a massive gulf between the 1% and what they want out of life, what they expect, and how they live day to day. And I mean that a $500 million floating city, your bubble out there. You can't run it by yourself, can you?
No, not at all. And, being divorced from the rest of the world, you can't stay that way forever. That's for sure. And you're still on the same planet. So if you're messing up the planet, you're going to get messed up one way or another.
Well, that's just it. That's just it. And can you outrun it? Can you outrun the pace of the destruction that's in your wake? I don't think you can. And that's the thing. How can you convince yourself that if you spend that sort of money, even though your massage parlor might be a wonderful place to retreat to today and maybe tomorrow, that if everything really does go down the drain, that's not where you'll be spending your time. I wonder how well equipped are those boats? I'm just going to call them boats, those yachts. How well equipped are they if everything fails? It's like for me, I think my example of the electric tea kettle, my water boiler, my tea boiler there, I really depend on that. Just, I come in, I'm not even awake in the morning. I put fresh water in there, close the lid, push the button, and within just a couple minutes, my tea water is ready. It always looks good. It's always the right temperature. Everything's great. But when that thing failed, I had to go in the storeroom and, dig around in there under some boxes of stuff for the tea kettle that goes on the hob. I mean, I was happy I had it, and I'm not complaining about doing that because that's why I kept it, in case the tea boiler or the electric kettle stops working for whatever reason, because I don't keep a backup. So do they have everything backed up, do you think?
Yeah, they'll have a number of backups, I'm sure, but you'll run out of them eventually.
Yeah. Plus, you have to have somebody that knows how to hook all of that stuff up, how to keep it. I mean, think about school systems or malls, or there's a grocery store, kind of an everything store, not far from where we live. And we go there often enough where they're having problems with the refrigerators. And they're not abusing the refrigerators. They're just, using them properly. But every now and then they
having them constantly working 24/7, 365.
I know, but that's how it would have to be on one of those fancy yachts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would be to have your refrigerator or refrigeration system, or how about your air conditioning? And that always gets goofed up. And
yeah, it takes a lot of power.
It takes a lot of power, and plus, I am sure that they don't have the staff to get in there and clean those things out. And I know on the cruise ships that the air conditioning units are just boiling with disease and, that sort of unattractive stuff. So are they having people clean those out regularly? And will this still be able to happen when everything just kind of goes bad? You wonder at the mindset.
Yeah, the mindset is very short term, like as long as they're going to live anyway.
Yeah, and their loved ones. I mean, the floating ones, they'd have to have everybody they love with them all the time. And I know at least one of the celebrities, one of the biggies, has a separate chase yacht that is a helipad. And he likes to get on his helicopter and fly to the top of a mountain and ski down. So he doesn't have to wait in the lines.
Oh my goodness.
With the rabble. He doesn't have to wait in the lines with the rabble to get to the top of the slopes. He can just go for it. How cool is that? And he doesn't even need permission. That seems like it would be a thing that you would need clearance for airspace, but I guess because he's able to fly low, he can just do that. That doesn't seem right to me. Of course, none of it seems right to me. Now, I was going to ask you, okay, So I think both you and I realized that a giant yacht, a $500 million yacht, or maybe 2 yachts with your helipad, that's a bit much, and that you aren't safe on that. No matter how comfy you are at the moment, that is going to require a massive amount of maintenance, repair, staffing to keep it all going, unless you have like a smaller compartment in there that is just for you, that you can maintain by yourself, which I doubt, because people lose those skills. What kind of a space would you set up for yourself if you were going to think in terms of self-protection in the event of things going really badly?
Just a minimalist, really, because it's a lot easier to have backups for, or to, bob and weave as things become scarce. Just start out believing and knowing that you're going to be living a very Spartan lifestyle from now on, and understand that, and start out that way.
Yeah,
and
so you get
those
used
are the
to
ones
it.
that will survive longer. Definitely. I mean, living in a cave kind of thing, and being happy with just enough food, and being mobile, and not having a whole bunch of stuff.
What would be non-negotiable for you? If you were rigging yourself out, let's say in a cave, let's say you found yourself a cave somewhere that had reasonable ventilation so that you could maybe have a small cook fire in there, and so it wasn't so clammy and damp, what would you absolutely need for yourself? I mean, beyond food, clothing, shelter, water, beyond the basics, what would you need to be okay for a longer period?
Well, what do you mean? Just like enough to keep yourself alive, or enough to keep your brain sort of from going crazy?
Both, let's say.
I know you got to have the basic stuff, right, to keep yourself alive: food and water, and some shelter. And beyond that, whatever you can carry, and you shouldn't be carrying very much, to be honest.
In an escape situation, to a grab and run. Remember when that was a big thing? At around Y2K, there was all this talk about how everybody should put together a grab and run bag. And in that, you would have the basics of how maybe to start a fire. You would have maybe some water purification tablets. You would have some cordage, which I thought was a good one. Like for what, Dave? What would you use cordage for?
Oh, you got to have it. You definitely got to have it. To, you could stretch some material out over for extra shelter.
Waterproofing.
Yeah, you can make like traps with it to catch wild animals like bunnies and stuff. And really, there's a million uses for cordage. You got to have it, no doubt, a lot of it.
Yeah. For clotheslines, and even clotheslines, if you think about it, with a tarp spread over the top and something dry underneath you.
Well, we were camping one time, you'll probably recall. Well, a number of times actually, but one in particular. And there were bears about, and we were in the deep woods, rough camping. Although rough camping is really safer than going to a campsite, because the bears have become used to being able to get some food from the garbage cans and stuff.
Yeah.
So we've been in actual campsites, state campsites and all that, where it was much more treacherous in terms of bears than if you're out in the wild.
And raccoons. Remember how they come out of the woods snarling, fighting with each other over trying to grab whatever you had?
So anyway, there's something daunting about being in the deep woods, sort of very primal. And even though like I said, you're probably at some less risk of having a bear encounter out there than you are in a public campsite, you still, it crosses your mind, right? So one of the rules is that wherever your cook fire is should be quite a distance away from where your tents are, or whatever you're doing. Some people camp out in the open. I've never been a fan of that. So anyway, it was quite a distance. I don't know. I'm trying to guesstimate how long it was. Maybe 20, 30 feet away or something from the cook fire area. And So what I came up with the idea of, because some people were, they were thinking, "Ooh, this is kind of scary in here." So because I had enough cordage, I ran a whole line from the tent that I was in, and then hooked up some of the like pots and pans, and dangled them from a tree limb near where the cook fire was. And then I did it so that I could just pull on that cordage and then clang these pots around, so that if a bear was out there sniffing around the fire, you could kind of scare them off.
And they say that something as simple as like jangling your keys on your key ring, because it's an unfamiliar sound to a wild bear, usually.
Yeah, exactly. You don't really hear that in the wild, the metal on metal sound.
No. And that worked out. I got a good night's sleep that night because you had that. And also I thought if they tripped or disturbed that cord that you had connected to that, we would have some early knowledge that there was some visitors around the tent. And so I just went to sleep.
That's the other thing that people have done in areas where there's a lot of wild animals around, and actually take the cordage and make a perimeter around your tent and prop it up off the ground a little bit with sticks or whatever, and then have that connected to some sort of alarm system. Some of those cheap ones you can buy at a dollar store, that have a little magnet, and they, a little watch battery or something in it. And then, if anything trips over that perimeter line, then the alarm goes off. So,
and that does give you some measure of comfort.
Yeah.
Also, that cordage is really important because you can take, let's say you have a soft-sided cooler or something like that you're keeping your food for a few days in. They say that you should suspend that from some tree limb.
All of your food, should be hung up in a tree somewhere where it would be hard for an animal to get. A lot of them climb, even bears, of course, but you look for a tree that kind of tilts a little bit so it's not straight up, and then that way you can hang it out on a branch, and it would be hard for an animal to get to.
Yes. Well, if I was setting up let's say, a permanent camp where I was going to stay for a little bit, one of the things that I would really want to have is two, actually, cast iron pots. I would want like a fry pan kind of thing or a griddle, and a Dutch oven type pan.
Not friendly for backpacking, however.
No, not if I were on the move. That would not work out. But if I was trying to set up my cave where I expected to be there for a while, that is a luxury, really a necessity for me. Because if you're cooking over an open flame for whatever reason, things tend to burn. If you're using a light-duty pot, I know a lot of camping pots that are sold. I always have looked at those and I think to myself, you're never going to really be able to cook very well in that unless it's way high above the flame, because stuff burns in thin-bottomed pans. Fry pans, skillets, any kind of a thing like that. Where if you have a good quality cast iron pot, it's a lot more forgiving.
Those spreaders are helpful in that regard.
They are.
So put that underneath the pot. I don't know what do you call that? I'd call it a spreader.
I think so.
You get the idea.
Yeah. How about those aluminum pots that they used to sell for camping? It was kind of a nested affair, and the handles came off the skillet. It was a bucket, and then it had most of them
like
4 plastic plates with compartments in the plates, and then it had another little pan that could be used for making scrambled eggs in the morning, and then it had usually metal cups. They were kind of a saucer-shaped thing, with metal handles, presumably so that you could warm up a drink on a fire with those. But again, all of it was made out of aluminum.
I know, right?
And it wasn't long after that we all learned that is not a good choice.
Getting a good, healthy dose of aluminum every time you use those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the non-stick stuff, the things that have coatings on them, they're really bad too. And people are beginning to understand that all of that weird stuff that we've been using all of these years is way worse for us than, like I say, cast iron, That's at least we know that the iron is not going to be long-term poisonous to our system. So you want to limit it maybe, but it's still in the long run way better than the chemical coated non-stick kind of things.
Yeah, titanium is the way to go.
You could have pancakes every day, Dave.
Yeah, of course. It's a law, I think, when you're camping. You
gotta have
pancakes out in the woods.
And that syrup, and oh my gosh, I like sausage with it, and bacon smells so good in the morning. Oh, I love it. So those 2 pans would be imperative for me: a slotted spoon, a ladle, and a spatula type deal. I would also need, you know what, one kitchen item I never have a kitchen without, I always make sure I have one of those jar funnels, like a canning funnel. I don't even pretend to think I'm going to be cooking without those. A lot of what I cook are what I call mason jar salads and things like that. And I use those mason jars, or sometimes recycled mayo jars, other things like that. And those canning funnels are really wide. They're wider than a wide mouth jar opening. And so if you're using leftovers or you've made a nice salad and you want to store it, that's a really great way to put it in the jar without any waste, without a bunch of mess, and then screw the top down, and they're easy to store. You see exactly what you have in there to work with. And so that is one of the things that I absolutely insist on in my kitchen. And I am never without. In fact, when I go on a picnic, usually I take the salads, my mason jar salads, in those jars, and I'll bring sometimes, plastic bowls or something like that to put it in just during dinner time, just for pretty more than anything, because you can certainly serve right out of those jars. And I have, and I do, but if you have a crowd or something, it's kind of nice to have it in bowls. But any that's left over, you might want to pop back in the jar and take it home to deal with, whether you're going to eat it or whether you have to say, I don't really feel great about using this again. It's still better to tote it home in the jar you brought it in. And so then I just use my canning jar funnel, pop it back in there, take it home and deal with it, in my own kitchen.
Yeah,
so,
but you're not going to backpack with all that.
No, we're not talking about backpacking. Although I would be tempted to do something. I would probably take that. In those 3 serving implements: a slotted spoon, a ladle, and a spatula.
You had to make one time.
I did. You know what? we used a palm leaf. We happened to have some aluminum foil with us, so we covered the palm leaf.
More of a stem,
Was it the stem?
Yeah.
But it was flat and shaped like a spatula, so we had forgotten it, and we were doing a cookout. It was at a park, a nice park. And so we just covered it with aluminum foil and used that, and it worked slick. And we were really proud of ourselves for problem solving in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Look around, see what you got in your environment.
Well, that's it, isn't it? So those things would be sort of high on my list. Definitely some sort of a kettle. I would forsake the kettle in favor of a fairly deep pan, boiler, a pan I could boil water in, and then I could dip it out into cups with my ladle. But if you take a tea kettle, you can't really do a soup in that, or, boil up some vegetables or pot herbs or something like that. That wouldn't work. The kettle wouldn't work, but a pan would. When I say kettle, I mean a dedicated tea kettle with the little narrow opening about the size of a silver dollar. But a pan with high sides that you could do soup or sauce or something like that, maybe hard-boiled eggs. That would be a lot more versatile, and you still could make your tea water hot in those. So something to think about, huh?
Yeah, there's a lot to think about.
Do you think...
What would you do for entertainment?
I would leave that all to you. I could sing.
That's okay.
I always offer. You have to admit, I always offer. But normally, most of the people who've heard me sing are, more than happy to politely discourage me.
Rest your voice, dear.
Yep.
You don't want to strain it or anything.
Yeah. This is a lot for me. I would leave it to you and say, okay, come up with something. I mean, you can sit and listen to the birds like we were talking yesterday. It can be very, very entertaining, but it may wear thin after a while if you had no choice.
Yeah, so you should have some sort of device with you that you could recharge with a small solar panel and load it up with audiobooks or something. And if you're way, way out there and there's no internet connection, or even if there is and it's down, if you know what I mean, then you have your own little internet, so to speak, as long as you've prepared all of that.
Yeah. But you can't hammer the batteries. I mean, you'd have to make that like a little short-term thing.
It is a challenge if you're camping in the deep woods, for instance, to get exposure to the sun. And sometimes you would have to hike a little bit, fan out a little bit until you found more open space for your solar panel.
Yeah. I think also, and this is me being a princess, something soft, an air mattress, or one of those nice close-up foam pads for under your sleeping bag. I remember one time something went wrong. I forget. We left a bag of stuff home, and we were sleeping directly on the ground, and a few hours. I think I got a few hours sleep, and then after that I woke up and there was no bone in my back that wasn't screaming. So, yeah, that's real important.
And it's usually the coldest nights when you are not fully prepared.
Yeah, and the ground is cold and it makes it ache worse. Remember when you were trying the balloon experiment? Do you remember that?
Yeah, that works pretty well, actually.
Describe it.
Well, you've got a sleeping bag or a sleeping sack or something, right? So when it gets cold and you're camping, then you have to basically, you'll get cold even if you have a good sleeping bag or sack, because the covers are obviously laying on top of you. So there's some insulation there, but there is no insulation between your body and the cover. And so that's kind of what breaks down with the whole idea of having a good sleeping bag or whatever. If you keep it away from your skin somehow, then you're going to stay warmer because you don't have a direct connection between the cold, so to speak, through the insulated bag, mind you, but it is not going to be connected directly to your skin if it's not laying on your body. So a balloon, which are easy to carry, a bunch of those and just blow them up and sleep with them, basically.
Yeah, but do you have like an inner liner on your your sleeping bag? So you put the balloons between the liner and
right, but this would work even if you only had one thing, just the sleeping bag. So you blow the balloons up in there and then you kind of sleep with them, and because they're taller than your body is laying flat, then they provide an extra area of air insulation and you stay warmer.
So a fairly good sized balloon. I don't like that. I'm sorry. That would be kind of latexy, and that would feel uncomfortable to me. Well, I don't know that
you could choose the latexy feel or being cold. That's your choice.
Yeah, I suppose. I do like those polar fleece things. They don't react. A lot of other stuff that I've used over the years tends to take on a clammy feel. Oh, yeah, toward morning, you notice it.
Also, if you're camping and you expect it to be cold, or you're in an area where it often does get cold, then you're probably not going to sleep with no pants on. So you're not your skin isn't. I know I was saying the skin and all that, but you're going to have some sort of
sweatsuit,
pajama bottom or something that you won't feel the latexy thing.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I would never, even in the real hot weather, I would tend to wear something because I'm one of those people, as we've said before, that gets bit up. In fact, remember those survival shows that used to be on TV?
I know what happened to those. Those were fun.
Yeah, they were, and they were always on.
Yes,
They're probably on some cable channel or they're streaming on something. But I remember always thinking, I might not be afraid of the lions, the tigers, and the bears, or any of those, even snakes I'd be kind of scared of. But what would absolutely terrify me and discourage me from ever thinking that I could do what those people do, because I'm just in awe of them. But it would be the bugs. Some of those people, especially the women, oh my gosh, their little bodies were
Naked
covered
and Afraid,
with
that show. That might still be going, or at least in reruns.
I know.
Naked and Afraid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem there. The
It's
bugs,
the insects.
obviously.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And the only thing you can do is find some mud and just pack yourself with mud. It's the only protection if you got nothing else with you, and that's the whole point of the show, of course.
You have nothing else with you, I know. And even like ideally you would want some sort of a fire, and then you try to position yourself fairly close to the fire. But I don't know, a smudge stick or something smoky that would kind of clear a space and make it less hospitable to insects would be a
joke
good
that
thing.
I had signed you up for that show.
Oh, I know. There is no amount of money. I am sorry.
Oh, there is. Everybody has
there
their
is
price.
not. I hate being bit up. And I am not keen on snakes.
$1 million. How about that? Just have to go on the show. That's all you got to do.
You're welcome to do it. Go right for it.
What's your price then?
I don't have a price for that. It's not
come
worth
on.
it to me,
Everybody
Dave. It
does.
isn't. You know what I think the difference is I think for me, I live pretty close to, the ideal of what I'd want. And I do not have a lot. I'm not a big consumer. I have pretty much what I want. I enjoy, maybe getting a new outfit or something like that occasionally. And I love books. And that makes me happy. I don't need $1 million. And that might sound like I'm lying or holier than thou or some other thing. But I really, putting myself through that, even for, however, I think it was 21 days of being bitten up
There were
constantly.
varying time periods, yeah.
For 21 days, and there's no guarantee. Even if you got bit up and, snakes were biting you and tigers and bears were chewing on your head, there's no guarantee that you're going to get the $1 million because you have to last. And some of those people you see, they were there like 18 days or within just hours, really, of making that challenge. And then they said, okay, we're taking you out of here because you dropped 1 more pound and now it's dangerous for you. And so you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, if I had known that this was going to come out this way, why would I have subjected myself to this much discomfort? And when we say discomfort, insect bites are really dangerous. I mean, who knows what downstream thing you're going to get, from Lyme disease to some of those other horrible diseases. And so the one guy's ear, remember that one guy that was on there? His ear swelled up, it looked horrible. And apparently he left, they took him out of the show. I don't remember if he won or what, but it was a long time before that healed. And so you think, wow, is that worth it, man? And especially if you don't have health care and you have to keep going back. And, oh, brother, not worth it to me.
Well, you can put stuff in the contract.
That what, they got to pay for all of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, they don't talk about that.
No,
it would
they
seem
wouldn't.
like if they're trying to attract people, that would be something they'd say, hey, don't worry about it if you get some, horrible insect-borne disease. We'll cover it as long as it takes to get you back on your feet. And
I probably do.
I haven't heard it. And that's something I'd want to hear before I ever signed up for something like that.
That's right. You can negotiate your own contract.
Probably not. No, you're kidding yourself. They've got a sign here kind of thing. And a lot of people do like to challenge themselves. But I don't get the sense that enduring, a massive infestation of some sort of insects is really what they're hoping to prove to themselves. Most of them, it's that they can build a fire no matter what, rubbing two sticks together, or they can put together a very sound shelter out of, tree branches and mud.
Yeah.
And most of those people have kind of almost a paramilitary mindset, and that's kind of where they're going with all of that. But, I don't know. You see some of them just bitten like that. The one girl, there was no square inch of her body that wasn't reacting to insect bites. I can't even imagine that. And she didn't last the whole time, I don't believe. And in fact, there were more than one. And I think it was more prominent, a problem for females than males. And it must be body chemistry or something like that, because after a while, it couldn't be your perfumey soap that you used the day before you showed up for the challenge, So, I don't know.
You do get to pick one thing. They give you a little sack, and that's mainly so that you can hang it in front of your particulars there. So it saves the editors a lot of time. But they apparently you can choose one thing only to bring, and you hope it's not the same thing as your partner brought.
What would you bring?
Kind of interesting. I think the container is probably the most important thing, because you can, when you find water, you can boil it and that kind of thing. You got to think about, of course, food and all that.
Yeah, I think that's a good choice. Ideally, your partner would bring a knife.
6 C's of survival. Why did I lead with that? I don't know if I remember what they are, but there are 6 of them.
6?
All starts with C. Yeah, container is one of them.
Okay, container, cordage. We talked about that.
There's 2. Cover.
3.
Combustion.
4.
Cutting.
5.
One more.
You said container.
Yep, said container, cover, cordage, combustion, cutting.
What else do you need?
There's one more. Quick, look it up.
No, I can't look it up.
So we can seem like we're smart.
Well, we got 5 out of 6.
Yeah.
Hey, this was
That's pretty
everybody's homework. Figure out what number 6 is. Learn the first 5 like we did, and let's all make a pact to go find out what is the 6th C that you need for survival. And so it's not $1 million so that you can buy yourself a yacht, because $1 million wouldn't even do it. It takes 500 million or close to that. I wouldn't want to be the guy driving those. I don't know. Not fun. You never know until you try. I don't want to try, Dave. Have you seen those storms at sea? Oh, my goodness. When I can't imagine. We've talked before about our ancestors crossing the sea in a boat. And I would be so afraid if there was a storm. That would be pretty sickening, too, bouncing around down in the hold. And you would be worried that the whole thing would smash apart. So, I don't know. Not for me. And I mind less the idea of living in a cave than floating around out in the sea. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of super good options for survival. No, there's really not. Do your best. Do your best. That's really your mindset is really most of it, actually. And I do think that you should plan for a weather emergency. Have a few things put away in a watertight container, taped up on the side so, water can't get in, and then fixed somewhere where they're not going to be floating away if you have a flood situation, or blowing away where you wouldn't be able to get to them. So with that, we're out of time. I have the answer. What? It's 5 C's. Oh, is it 6? That was a dirty trick. And with that, we'll sign off.
Okay.
Talk to you tomorrow. Count your blessings and take good care of yourself and everybody you love.
Bye now.
Bye.